Lord of the Mysteries, A Time Traveler in the Fourth Age by author Kai Yun-ji. Chapter 277-286. Still looking for the key of death. Pale yellow eyebrows, an extremely disheveled appearance, and muttering about the captain. Without even needing to see his face, it was clear this was Flaming Danitz, who had just gained his freedom from Gehrman Sparrow. At this point, it seemed that the contact person for Vice Admiral Iceberg, or rather, the Golden Dream, left in Byam, had been taken out by Iron Mavati, the first mate of Blood Pirate General. He himself was severely wounded by this Sequence 6 zombie, barely clinging to life, and was now in a desperate hurry to report to the underworld. When Furs saw him rush over covered in blood, it was already polite of her not to immediately throw a small spell at him. Even so, she still pulled Shah-Ir to the side, while vigilantly watching Danitz, her fingers already on the surgical knife hidden in her sleeve. "It's you. That's great. Help me pass a message to the captain. No. Help me pass a message to that dark-faced guy, tell him to tell our captain that old Lin has been discovered. Iron Mavati, for that treasure." Danitz also recognized Shah-Ir, whom he had met once. He had originally wanted to approach him in surprise, but seeing Furz's wary expression, he could only force a bitter smile and lean weakly against the wall, supporting his tottering body. Considering Shah-Ir's apparent wealth, he began to complicatedly explain his last wishes. Cough, I'm not going to make it. All my savings have been converted into real estate. The proof documents are hidden in the basement of 13 Agarwood Avenue in Byam. Numbers 12 to 16 are all mine. Help me sell them. You can take most of it. I only hope you take the remaining money to Nosy Town in southern Intis, give it to my parents, and tell them I really struck it rich. As Danitz spoke, he felt his vision darken, and tears flowed uncontrollably. If he truly had no other choice, he wouldn't want to gamble on a stranger's kindness. You know him. Furs turned to Shah-Ir upon hearing this. Not well. But 5 properties can sell for a lot of money. I can help with this. Even a Sequence 7 could accumulate 5 properties in about 5 years, and he even knew to buy property. Shah-Ir could only say that Vice Admiral Iceberg had taught him well. He glanced at the shadow cloak on Danitz's body, chanted a couple of simple lines, and the flesh in Danitz's abdomen began to squirm. Flesh magic filled the gap in his abdomen, and the so-called fatal wound was directly erased. The only price paid was that Danitz lost a few pounds. Saving your life for one of your properties isn't too much, is it? Shah-Ir retracted his hand. The darkness in Danitz's eyes was replaced by light, and a surge of joy from surviving a disaster welled up in his heart. He nodded repeatedly with excitement. Meanwhile, Klein, who had rushed over quickly after hearing some commotion and witnessed all of this, suddenly felt his steps become heavy. A step too late, Klein complained inwardly. He could have treated that injury too. Who is this again? Furs looked at Gehrman Sparrow, dressed as a typical bounty hunter, and grew alert once more. How did I get involved in a murder case by accident? Is this person here to hunt down this unlucky fellow? He looks difficult to deal with. Should I ask for another property later? I know him. Klein also felt strange at this moment, but he still maintained the persona of a crazy, cold, and tough bounty hunter. His posture was still that of a standard high-level bodyguard, crossed out, professional killer, crossed out, a predatory stance like an upright king cobra that people couldn't ignore. Do as you please. Remember, my reward, the property at number 12 is mine. Shah-Ir raised his hand in a chin-stroking gesture. Danitz, who had been looking at Klein, nodded repeatedly again. Although he felt a little cold and sore after recovering, he absolutely dared not refuse. Moreover, the other party had saved him and only taken 1/5 of his wealth. What a good person. Danitz's eyes were filled with gratitude as he looked at Shah-Ir. Let's go, we'll go look at the houses. Shah-Ir took Furz's hand and naturally walked away down the street. Klein stared intently at Shah-Ir's back. He could clearly feel that there was something strange about this person, but his origins were unclear, he hadn't shown obvious hostility, and there was no bounty, so he couldn't act. From time to time, he would feel a sense of familiarity, but it would flash and disappear, completely unable to be connected. After walking down a street, Furs leaned closer to Shah-Ir and whispered. "That person seems to be targeting you. We should be careful." Furs was still thinking about striking first and gaining the upper hand. After all, she couldn't give up the free property she had just acquired. Who would have thought that while merely traveling to Byam, a kind person would proactively offer a house? She couldn't help but exclaim, as expected of the city of generosity, the people here are just so generous. No wonder they all say to look for gold at sea. That's Mr. World, you can't kill him. Shah-Ir tapped Furs on the head. Even as a demigod, he couldn't just bully people. Ah, Mr. World. Furs froze, subconsciously looking back, but of course saw nothing. She truly hadn't expected that the gloomy and dangerous Mr. World from the Tarot Club would be somewhat handsome in reality, though his dangerous demeanor seemed unchanged. "How did you?" She started to speak, then immediately closed her mouth. Right, as a favored one of Mr. Fool, it was normal for him to know more. This matter certainly couldn't be discussed publicly. Why is Mr. World in Byam? Furs changed her question. Who knows, maybe he's short on money. There's another possibility, which is that he also wants to be a favored one. Shah-Ir spoke without hesitation, leaving Furs dumbfounded and no longer thinking about striking first. "We're here, go open the door." As they chatted, they arrived at 12 Agarwood Avenue in Byam, only to find it rented out. "What now? Should we try another house?" Furs pointed to number 16 on the other side, which was empty. "Then let's try that one." Shah-Ir had no objections. The two of them simply moved into 16 Agarwood Avenue. Furs seemed to have a key, and they moved in very naturally, not looking like burglars or thieves at all. On the other side, Klein and Danitz exchanged awkward glances. Neither of them had expected to reunite so soon after parting, and in such a disheveled manner. "You look pretty good." Klein greeted him. Danitz didn't really want to talk, but given the current situation, he needed this guy's protection to deal with Iron, Maviti's subsequent pursuit. "I'm actually." He immediately confessed everything. "So what's the treasure?" Klein asked curiously. "I don't know, it was just a huge black iron key salvaged from a sunken ship. Some say it's the key of death, a key that can allow someone to become a true god." Danitz was both angry and annoyed, a bunch of lunatics whose brains have been gnawed by zombies. Offline meet up. Byam, the city of generosity. Shah-Ir and Furs were staying in a property provided by Danitz, while Klein and Danitz squeezed into a luxurious suite at the Azure Wind Hotel in the docks, paid for by Danitz. "Aren't you curious about the treasure that pirate mentioned? It's something that even Blood Pirate General was tempted by." It was Furs's first time in Byam, and she was met with a rainstorm, but she wasn't discouraged. She sat in front of the fireplace, listening to the vigorous rain outside the window, and even found it a bit exciting. With a relaxed state of mind, she chatted with Shah-Ir. "A key, salvaged from the sea. Its peculiarity is that it hasn't rusted despite being submerged for many years. Vice Admiral Iceberg suspects the key is even older, not belonging to humans, and might point to the era before the Great Cataclysm, when giants, dragons, elves, and other Beyonder creatures existed." Shah-Ir didn't understand how this item came to be known as the Death Key among pirates. Even if it truly were the Death Key, it would be useless. Death's treasure had already been taken by him. A proper tomb robbery requiring a key would be too unprofessional. A key from the Second Epoch. Oh my, could this be related to the East Continent? Furs immediately thought of the former Giant Court, now the East Continent. Perhaps. The fact that a key related to the Giant Court could circulate was surprising enough. Even Shah-Ir wasn't entirely sure who originally made this key, or why it was lost. "Wait, how do you know about this key?" Furs suddenly realized, she didn't remember, flaming, Danitz mentioning any of this. "Things that happen at sea rarely escape my notice. You might not know, but our tarot club is quite powerful," Shah-Ir said with a relaxed tone. "So, what does Mr. World plan to do next?" Furs rolled her eyes and probed. On the other side, Klein asked Danitz to write down everything the Blood Pirate General and his subordinates had done. You're making it difficult for me. How could I possibly remember? He's not a beauty like the captain. Danitz spread his hands in complaint, then saw Klein slowly reveal a terrifying smile. What are you going to do? Danitz crossed his arms and instinctively moved backward. I'm going to hunt them. From Danitz's perspective, Gehrman was grinning ferociously at that moment. He's short on money and belief, so he might be planning to climb the ranks by stepping on the Blood Pirate General. The Blood Pirate General and his pirate crew are covered in blood, deeply sinful, and have a terrible reputation. Shah-Ir felt that these pirates were born for Mr. Fool. Killing pirates for bounties was much easier than directly robbing an exchange house. This was earned labor, without any psychological burden. Hunting the Blood Pirate General sounds like something Mr. World would do. I've also heard of his reputation. It's indeed terrible, plundering wealth, abducting people, massacring crew members, and abusing women. If Furs didn't lack the strength, she would really want to help Mr. World. Yes, his desires are extremely strong. Whether the target is male or female, basically, any humanoid creature will do. In this regard, I concede defeat. Shah-Ir had played a wraith's role, but at this moment, she wouldn't empathize with a wraith. Hey, Furs just chuckled at this. She casually asked, are we going to participate in Mr. World's hunt? In her eyes, wouldn't a demigod's intervention simply be a slaughter? That depends on whether he has other collaborators. Shah-Ir smiled cheerfully. The next day, above the gray mist, Klein recalled something that felt off. It seemed that every time he encountered that gentleman, he would be drawn to other points, thereby overlooking other more noteworthy areas. For example, when they first met at the alley entrance, because of Danitz, he didn't even notice when the other party left. This method is a bit like a spectator. Klein didn't ponder for too long before something even more frustrating happened. He first clicked on the crimson star symbolizing Mr. Hanged Man. Respected Mr. Fool, I encountered, Flaming, Danitz, with whom I'd previously interacted, at the casino. From him, I learned some information about the Death Key, and also heard that he was involved in the Bansi incident and plans to team up with a powerful individual to deal with Iron Mavati. I suspect that the powerful individual he mentioned is one of our own. If so, and they still need assistance, I am willing to provide some help. This was Mr. Hanged Man's voice. Danitz, I only gave you half a day of freedom. Klein found it hard to describe his feelings at this moment. But there weren't too many negative emotions. Mr. Hanged Man had always been meticulous, so it was acceptable that he could guess. Klein looked at another still flashing crimson star. Thinking of Mr. Angel inviting Miss Magician to travel together during the last tarot club, a bad premonition suddenly arose in his heart. He touched the crimson star symbolizing Angel. Just seeing the black robe, Klein already had a guess. Although the face wasn't shown, the clothes weren't even changed during the prayer. You've been exposed, Angel. Klein's lips curled upwards. Even the most mysterious angel in the tarot club was pretty much like an ordinary person in reality. Respected Mr. Fool, while Miss Magician and I were traveling in Byam, we encountered Mr. World. He seemed to harbor some undue hostility towards us. Please help me convey to Mr. World that the famous sealed artifact is quite recognizable. Also, if he needs anything, he can ask me for help. This was Angel's prayer content. After listening, Klein leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head, momentarily unable to react to where he had made a mistake. Alger only guessed that it was a favored one of the Fool, but Angel could directly pinpoint World. Could it be that Angel is not from the mystery prior pathway, but the audience pathway? Or does he possess a sealed artifact from the audience pathway? Klein almost laughed. A single Byam had managed to gather half of the tarot club. The exposure was too quick. So, the person with the somewhat fierce eyes he saw earlier was Miss Magician. She seemed a bit different from her demeanor at the tarot club. So, were Angel and Magician really just here for tourism? How did Angel get Miss Magician here? Teleportation. And he even got a free set of rooms. Look on the bright side, at least the connections from the Tarot Club can be used directly offline. Klein manifested, world, blurred the background of the dummy, and had the dummy assume a praying posture, replying to the two, enthusiastic, members one by one. Respected Mr. Fool, I just happen to need some collaboration. This was the reply to, Hanged Man, Alger. Thank you for the reminder. This was the reply to, Angel. Begging your pardon, Madam Hermit. At 16 Shongshu Avenue, Byam, Shah Iyer saw a scene shrouded in faint gray fog, receiving a message from the Fool. Mr. World thanked Shah Iyer for his concern and declined to engage in cooperation. He wasn't willing to cooperate. As expected, he thought that Steele, McVitie's £6,000 wasn't enough to split, right? Perhaps he also felt that playing a mad adventurer in front of an angel would be awkward if he couldn't act mad enough. He glanced at the heavy rain still pouring outside the window, his thoughts already drifting far away. Spirit world, a virtual personality, split off from Shah Iyer's thoughts, wandered here. He didn't need to find the hidden space where, see God, Cavatua resided. According to the layout, this little pet couldn't stay in the spirit world space once opened by Gao Exaname, nor could it stay in Shah Iyer's first stronghold from earlier years. So, as a guard dog, its location was easy to find. After passing through a layer of water curtain, one could clearly feel the divinity contained in the air. Shah Iyer directly locked onto the most active and savagely violent minds in the vicinity through the collective subconscious sea. His figure blurred, and when he reappeared, he was on top of a massive blue sea serpent's head. He looked down and could still see many priests of the Sea God Church prostrating themselves before Cavatua. However, none of these priests dared to look up at Cavatua. A roar echoed. It was as if it were a command. The human priests, some preparing food, others busy with rituals, trembled upon hearing the roar, then quickly and orderly withdrew from the hall as commanded. After these native Byam priests left, Cavatua lowered his head, and even his voice became docile. He clearly recognized the newcomer as a noble elf. Let me see. Shah Iyer directly extracted memories from Cavatua's spiritual island. This sea serpent apparently had no concept of privacy, only wiggling its body slightly in discomfort but showing no obvious resistance. Such sea monsters usually live longer than human saints, with the demoness of Undying and Sanguine Marquis being exceptions. Shah Iyer could see some developments in the Byam region from its memories. The elves did not fight to the death with the Loan Kingdom over this island, but chose another way to maintain their influence in the area. The elves remaining in the Rorstad archipelago didn't even live with Cavatua and these native priests, they still resided in the elves' previously established settlements. The elves were willing to give up a sequence 3, pushing a native-worshipped sea god to contend with the storm churches, Sea King, indicating that the storm pathway was not the optimal choice for the current elves. Shah Iyer also sensed some familiar aura from Cavatua, which was related to his Beander power. Book of Calamities. That yellow-skinned book I made when I collected the Dragon of Imagination's second personality's aura back then. Becoming famous too early isn't good, everything you see feels like your own. Shah Iyer disappeared silently. Only then did Cavatua raise his lowered head. Human-like excitement appeared in the eyes of this tyrannical and cunning sea serpent, and it almost wagged its tail. As a result, Byam experienced another heavy rain, and Sea King, Arn Courtman, who detected Beander elements in the rain, frowned. But as a cardinal of the Storm Church, despite his fiery temper, he didn't want to quarrel with a sea monster over a rainstorm. If an elf claimed to be the sea god, the Storm Church would definitely be enraged, possibly even incurring the Lord of Storm's divine wrath. If it was just a powerful sea monster worshipped locally being named the sea god, then the Storm Church wouldn't be so enthusiastic. Even if this sea god often blessed the local Byam rebels, adding extra costs to Loan's rule, the Storm Church would still be willing to maintain the traditional way of playing. The hidden space on Zemim Island. Shah Iyer sat directly on the throne Gao Exaname had built in the past. None of the elves in the ruins discovered that their king had quietly returned. He wasn't in a hurry to meet his old lovers one by one now. He was just thinking, should he, or when should he come clean with Mr. Fool? If Shah-Ir didn't nod, Klein wouldn't be able to obtain many things. This required a suitable reason to make everything logical. It seems I need the help of the hermit. Shah-Ir opened the ancient yellowish-brown parchment book in his hand. This was indeed the one he had personally made in the past. The craftsmanship seemed to have been improved, and while it couldn't be used as a complete Beander characteristic for sequence advancement, it was perfectly fine as a zero-level sealed artifact. This book also had a deep connection with Kavatua, serving as the reins to control this sea serpent. Great hidden sage, I hope you can show more favor to the girl named Katlia. Shah-Ir raised his hand in a prayer-like gesture. A phantom eye appeared, looked at him, blinked, and then disappeared. At the same time, on the future, Rear Admiral of Stars, Katlia, who commanded the Star Sea Pirates, felt the knowledge harassment from the hidden sage intensify. As long as Madame Hermit comes online, I can use her to compile a set of diaries. Even after some time, Mr. Fool will likely think that the diaries in Huang Jiajia's hands mostly come from Huang Beibei, and the diaries of Bernadette's father are undoubtedly genuine, authentic, and perhaps even complete sets. Shah-Ir felt that this plan was perfect. If he revealed himself, he would scare Klein. Using old Huang's words was much more suitable. Even wary cat wouldn't suspect an angel, because it's well known that angels rarely provide Rosal's diary. Huang Beibei's hurdle. Shah-Ir rubbed his forehead, a little headache. He wasn't quite sure if he had duped old Huang, although he had indeed planned it that way. He wasn't incapable of knowing these things, but he was also avoiding knowing too many things that hadn't happened. Moreover, if he had also participated in Bernadette's education, he wasn't very keen to know what Bernadette's current personality was. However, a sensible good child should be a good child no matter what. Evening. Olive Tree Avenue, Pamela's divination hut. Alger Wilson sat in this cafe, drinking Felmer coffee from the Paw River Valley on the Star Plateau of the South Continent. Tarot cards were spread on the table, the top one depicting an angel with hands tied behind his back, hanging upside down. This was the Hanged Man card. Shah-Ir sat beside him, drew an ace of swords, and threw it out, landing directly on top of the Hanged Man. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. At least £5. General. Shah-Ir suppressed his strange thoughts, picked up the tarot cards on the table. He had intended to divine his romantic prospects and worldly troubles, but upon picking them up, he realized that divining for himself was meaningless. So, he looked at the young man who had pushed open the brown wooden door and walked in, wearing a black woolen overcoat and a semi-tall silk top hat. This was a man who possessed both mature and gloomy temperaments. Although his appearance wasn't stunning, it was certainly not disappointing. The most interesting thing was that when he became fierce, his angular, slightly gaunt face would display a unique charm belonging to a strong individual. "Do you want a divination?" Shah-Ir asked, shuffling the tarot cards almost like playing cards. Klein scanned the two people at the table, one with blonde hair and blue eyes, handsome, a typical low and upper-class noble, the other with sharp features and a rugged outline, possessing mixed-race characteristics, clearly a man toughened by long-term exposure to wind and rain. With these two sitting together, the other patrons in the coffee shop didn't find it awkward, naturally assuming the relationship of a noble youth and a retired bodyguard. Byam, as an important Loan maritime colony, actually harbored a considerable number of hidden Loan nobles and wealthy merchants, though most were those who had lost out in internal Loan kingdom competition, or were representatives of noble and parliamentary families' interests in overseas colonies. However, they themselves symbolized power and wealth in the Loan kingdom's overseas colonies. Those who brought only one bodyguard were considered low tier in Byam's upper circles. Yes. Klein nodded. This was a very good reason for a meeting. However, unlike traditional divination where the querent shuffles and cuts the cards and the seer only interprets, the blonde gentleman directly drew 3 cards and laid them horizontally on the table, forming the past, present, and future spread. You're something else. A true seer. Seeing Shaw play like this, Klein simply abandoned all rules. The 3 cards were turned over in sequence. The first was the Hanged Man, the second was the Magician, and the third was the Fool. The first 2 were upright, the last one reversed. How do you interpret them? Klein asked, sitting comfortably in his chair. Your past was not smooth, you were vaguely dominated and moved forward. Your present is bright, though full of challenges, you still move forward with clear goals. Your future holds infinite possibilities, but at the end of the journey, even if you return to the starting point, you won't find that initial feeling again. Seeing that Klein asked nothing, Shaw spoke generally. Oh, and one more thing. The reversed Fool card indicates that in the future, you might. He didn't finish his sentence, but merely flicked his wrist, turning the reversed Fool card upright, signifying a sudden change in reputation. The proper seer, old Klein, listened to Shaw's interpretation and inwardly complained. Drifting with the current before 20, moving forward from 20 to 50, then at 50, suddenly looking back, but it's no longer the same. Is this guy interpreting revelations or playing psychology? And what's with that look? Can't I draw a reversed Fool? So, are you satisfied? Shaw's finger traced the 3 tarot cards spread on the table, or do you have any other questions? Hey, I'm a tarot card expert, do you understand the difference between professional and amateur? Klein shook his head with reserve. In other aspects, he might still have some gap with Angel, but when it came to divination, he wasn't looking down on Angel, there really was no comparison between them. Since there are no questions, my divination fee is £5. Shaw gently tapped the table with his finger. Alger, who was next to him, smiled upon hearing this. He naturally lowered his head, avoiding looking at Mr. World's expression. Klein, who was about to order a specialty coffee, froze, staring intently at Angel. 5 sentences cost me £5. Why don't you just rob me? This was roughly 2 or 3 weeks' salary for a low-end worker. The crazy adventurer really wanted to smash the tarot cards on the table into his face. His initial reluctance to involve Angel was absolutely correct. Isn't this price a bit high? Klein lowered his voice and leaned forward. He wasn't unable to pay, but he felt aggrieved. There are different tiers of fees for different tiers of clients. If you were a little girl who said, "Hello, uncle," I wouldn't charge you a single penny and would even treat you to coffee with milk and honey. Shaw calmly and confidently shuffled the cards. Alger, who had his head down, trembled slightly. Other guests who heard the commotion also looked over intentionally or unintentionally. Klein's face darkened repeatedly, but he couldn't fall out with Angel over £5, so he could only grit his teeth and pull money from his pocket. I'm the same. I'm also very lenient with little girls. As long as they're polite, I never mind treating them to something, just like now. Even if he lost the money, he wouldn't lose face. Gehrman's persona made Klein not forget to scoff a few times while paying. No, your eyes tell me that you're just saying that, but you've actually never treated any little girl to a drink. Maybe little boys, perhaps some nameless black tea. Shaw neatly folded the slightly crumpled banknotes and put them into his pocket with elegant movements. PFF'd. Klein felt an arrow pierce his chest, but he still relied on his faceless ability to compose his expression, as if he hadn't been hurt at all, completely indifferent. This guy is definitely a spectator. Klein really wanted to solve the problem with physical means, but this was a coffee shop, not a bar. So annoying. Ahem, let's talk about other things. Alger lightly coughed to mediate. From his observation just now, he could tell that Mr. World's various capabilities were all online, making him a good partner. Angel's ability was even more interesting. When he needed it, the gazes and whispers of other customers in the coffee shop could serve as his power. When he didn't need it, their table would be unconsciously ignored, so there was no need to worry about the content of their conversation being leaked. I also know a little about divination. Alger said, reaching for the tarot cards on the table. Bang! The cards on the table were clamped down by Gehrman. Get to the point. Klein was almost fuming at this point. Were they all making fun of him, the true seer, with the tarot club? Shaw-Iyer and Alger exchanged glances. Alger extended his hand and began to gesticulate. Since Mr. World's intelligence had been tested before, Mr. World would definitely understand. Thus, like this. Klein watched with folded arms as this rugged man, wearing a magic robe, gestured with famous sign language. Don't call me fool. The three members of the Tarot Club met at a tavern. Shaw-Iyer returned to 16 Cinnamon Tree Avenue. When Furs saw him return, she didn't even ask, completely unconcerned about where he had been. The Tarot Club had an offline gathering just now, and you weren't called. When Shaw-Iyer saw that Furs didn't ask, he simply mentioned it. An offline gathering? Besides you and the world, was there anyone else? Mr. Hanged Man. Furs let out an, oh. It was a gathering of 3 men, so she wasn't particularly keen on going. What did you talk about? She only listened as if it were gossip. We'll use the power of the Storm Church to encircle and annihilate McVitie's group, then trick the Storm Church into giving us internal rewards, which we'll divide according to our contributions. Shaw-Iyer said simply. You need the power of the Storm Church to deal with, Steele, McVitie. Furs was shocked. Of course, I have my own mission, to accompany you on a good stroll. Shaw-Iyer shook his head. Neither Klein nor Alger seemed to want him to participate in the game. He could only wait to get in touch with Huang Bebe, Huang Jiajia, and Vice Admiral Iceberg, Edwina. Oh, if there's nothing else, let's go to bed early. Aren't we going camping and fishing on the surrounding small islands tomorrow? Furs thought this was for the best. She was only out for a few days, and it would be great if this guy could accompany her the whole time. While Shaw-Iyer's life was proceeding in an orderly manner, Katlia's side was a bit difficult, but she was still persevering. Meanwhile, in the City of Silver, a somewhat eerie landscape painting appeared out of thin air. He passed through the mountain rivers and appeared in the graveyard of Havoc, the former chief of the City of Silver. His body was covered in faint white fluff, and a black handprint appeared on his back. If it weren't for the fact that the landscape painting has more artistic conception, I would have long since thrown the painting above the gray mist to cleanse the pollution. He said something he didn't even believe himself, rolled up the divine painting, put it into a golden scroll tube, and looked at the coffin in front of him. He had used this account before, but now, he found it somewhat beneath him. Souls, return. Shaw-Iyer chanted simply in Elvish. The coffin in front of him trembled, and the undead creature, inside, the consciousness of the former chief of the City of Silver still present in the spirit body, began to gradually return. If it were other pathways, it might be difficult to resurrect from the dead, but the death pathway was different. A sequence 3 ferryman, even without accidents, would gradually transform into an intelligent undead creature. If an accident occurred, it would only accelerate the transformation process. As long as their humanity was recovered, there was still a chance for salvation. My lord. From the first words of the giant climbing out of the coffin, it was clear that Shaw-Iyer's mental surgery was very successful. How is your recovery? Shaw-Iyer asked, looking at Havoc. I have recovered most of my memories. In my current state, I am also more willing to stay in places with the aura of the underworld. Havoc spoke truthfully. As an undead creature, it was best for him to maintain some distance from the living. This mausoleum was perfect, even if it was a self-created underworld environment, it was very suitable for him to live in. I will take over the City of Silver. Shaw-Iyer said directly. This is the honor of the City of Silver. Havoc bowed decisively. He had no intention of consulting with the other elders of the City of Silver first. He felt that he had the right to do so, as he was currently the strongest in the City of Silver. Then go ahead. As for faith, there's no need for it temporarily. Perhaps later I will have you believe in the Fool. Shaw-Iyer decided to take it slow, so as not to startle Mr. Fool with too much stimulation. Havoc took the order. He used the creatures of the underworld in the mausoleum to travel to the council tower of the 6-member Elder Council of the City of Silver. Shah-Ir, on the other hand, looked towards a certain spot in the forsaken land of the gods, and the echoes of the spiritual world spread out like ripples. I won't snatch the first blasphemy slate. How about you don't interfere with me repairing the damaged spirit world in the forsaken land of the gods? N%. Annoying sounds spread in the collective subconscious ocean. Although it was chaotic and the voices seemed deliberately provocative, Shah-Ir still understood that the true creator had chosen to agree. No contract was signed, just a verbal agreement. The true creator clearly didn't care about Shah-Ir doing things in the forsaken land of the gods. Whether Shah-Ir kept his promise wasn't that important. If he wanted to keep it, he would, regardless of whether there was a contract. Conversely, if he didn't want to, there were many loopholes to exploit. Repairing the damaged spirit world of the East Continent. It's a pity there's no such thing as merit in the world of mysteries. Shah-Ir thought of the circle of inevitability. If the Lord of the Mysteries could use enough matter and energy to restore the entire Earth to its original state through a wish, even after it was destroyed, then would the East Continent of the new Earth also be repaired incidentally. Celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. Shah-Ir chanted the celestial worthy's honorific title, communicating with his crimson star in the gray mist space, borrowing a bit of its characteristic, or perhaps, a spirit world repair permit. After receiving feedback from the gray mist space, he closed his eyes and created a relatively large dream world. Although the audience pathway did not have authority related to the spirit world, it possessed authority over dreams and the mind. A Sequence 3 dream weaver could weave dreams. After receiving sponsorship from the gray mist, he could connect the fragmented spirit world as a dream, using the dream as an adhesive for the spirit world fragments. Although this approach seemed to offer no immediate benefits, it allowed Shah-Ir to deepen his understanding of the spirit world, which was the most valuable aspect. The spirit world he repaired would, of course, be greatly influenced by him. The true creator did not interfere with his affairs, and he likewise would not interfere with the true creator's future departure. This was fair. On the other side, when the 6-member Council of Elders of the City of Silver saw Havoc's return, they were also pleasantly surprised. Havoc's success meant that the City of Silver now had a successful case of advancement to Sequence 3, which was, of course, exciting news for the current City of Silver. Although, Demon Hunter, Colin was wary of the suddenly returned former chief, his demon-hunting eye scanned him and found nothing unusual. Unless absolutely necessary, he also did not want to clash with the senior he once respected, so he stepped forward to inquire about the situation. Only Loea's eyes flickered, as if she understood something. "Havoc, did you successfully advance? Why did it take so long?" Chief Colin asked, as in traditional beliefs, such a long absence usually meant failure or death. "I encountered an accident during my advancement and almost lost myself. Fortunately, I received help from my lord." Havoc's words stunned the 6 elders of the City of Silver. They weren't unfamiliar with the term, Lord, it was just that in the City of Silver, and even in the Third Epic, this term appeared relatively infrequently, only being used more in the Second Epic. He said you can call him the Fool. When Havoc uttered the 2 words, the Fool, his expression was incomparably respectful. "Son, Fool," not to mention the expressions of the City of Silver elders, whose pupils constricted. If it were, "Son, Derek here," he would be even more surprised, wondering when Mr. Fool had contacted the former chief elder of the City of Silver. "Him?" Chief Colin asked, uncertain, as if he dared not be certain. "That is a messenger of God," Havoc affirmed. Seeing the varied reactions of the crowd, he didn't insist but, in the manner he used to interact with these colleagues, consciously changed his address to God's messenger. "Elder Havoc, where is that God's messenger?" Elder Waiter Hillmon, the second-ranked elder in the Council of 6, couldn't help but ask. "God's messenger is still in my tomb. Unless he comes out voluntarily, do not disturb him casually. I came to tell you that God's messenger, and Mr. Fool behind God's messenger, can rescue our City of Silver from the current darkness." This is an opportunity we must seize. Havoc looked at everyone with a solemn expression. He was awakened by Shah-Ir and, of course, was somewhat affected, but he could also feel the terrifying and heart-pounding power. Is he an angel? Elder Colin was silent for a moment, only asking one question. If the other party was an angel, then what the City of Silver needed to do would be very simple, and there would be no need to think too complicatedly. Havoc did not speak, only nodded slightly. Colin Iliad didn't know whether he was relieved or what, but his weathered blue eyes looked at Havoc and said earnestly, "Don't worry, we understand." As long as it was confirmed that the other party was an angel, many things became unimportant. This matter is to be kept secret for now. God's messenger means that he needs to prepare and see how to solve the City of Silver's most pressing problem, food. As Havoc spoke, he felt that Shah-Ir was indeed a worthy master to serve. Not only did he not demand immediate faith from the City of Silver, but he was also willing to help the City of Silver consider its problems and resolve its difficulties. Food. This was like a huge surprise crashing into the hearts of the elders of the City of Silver. Before they could inquire further, a golden radiance rose from the horizon. In this world full of darkness, light was such a luxury. Eyes that had long lived in darkness and somewhat degenerated, involuntarily shed tears at the appearance of this radiance. Within the tomb, Shah-Ir was already somewhat familiar with how to achieve his goals by relying on dreams. He thought of the main authority of a Sequence 2 discerner. As long as he believed himself to be strong enough, he would be strong enough, not bound by external appearances. This was indeed very suitable for him now. Day and night shall be distinct. He closed his eyes, his power transcending the limits of his body. His form became ethereal and transparent. A sun, an imagined sun, a sun he himself had transformed into, once again shone upon the East Continent after 2 epochs. Its sacred radiance purified the defilement and curses deeply rooted in the land. This scene was dazzling and captivating enough. The residents of the City of Silver watched the miracle in disbelief, all putting down what they were doing and prostrating themselves on the ground, not knowing whether they were begging for the Creator's forgiveness or thanking the Creator for his pity. More of them trembled as they reached out, worried that this was just an illusion from which they would soon wake, but even if it was a dream, they had never seen such warm radiance before. Sun. Derek was also stunned by the sudden rising sun. As a meander of the sun pathway, he was more affected. For a moment, even his devout faith in Mr. Fool wavered, and it seemed as if only that sun remained in his heart. This radiance was just and selfless. Whether it was the monsters hidden in the darkness or the humans struggling to survive in the ruins, as long as they stepped out of the gloomy corners, they could touch this energy. This light scorched the earth, and wisps of black aura were purified by the radiance. In Moon City, on the other side of the East Continent, the 3 priests guarding the Western Continent's barrier exchanged glances, their eyes filled with indescribable complexity and surprise. Their prayers to the Creator, however, could not be heard by anyone at this moment. This faith could only be given to the sun in the sky. On the desolate lands of the East Continent, the gigantic figure that wandered like a ghost stopped. This was God of Honor, Brattle, the youngest son of giant King Olmir, who had been cursed for openly cursing the ancient sun god and died in the Great Cataclysm. After his death, his remains had long wandered the East Continent. Until this moment, a scorching gaze fell upon him, pardoning his sins and ending his wandering of several epochs. His colossal remains collapsed with a crash, and the bones, coalescing into points of spiritual light, seemed to merge into the radiance, floating to the cemetery deep within the twilight forest. Deep within the cemetery, the 2 corpses violently dug out and lying outside their coffins returned to their coffins, resuming the long slumber they should have enjoyed. A faint morning glow coalesced into a tall, armored figure. The projection of giant King Olmir bowed slightly towards the sun in the sky, performing a salute. Even with only some mental remnants, this ancient god was still grateful that someone could help him, an ancient king who had long fallen, to collect the remains of his parents and bring the bones of his youngest son to this twilight-shrouded cemetery. At this moment, the twilight willingly dissipated before the sun. In a hidden valley on the East Continent, a castle stood. Inside the castle, corpses, of elves, giants, sanguine, humans, phoenixes, were suspended in midair by spirit body threads. The gloom demonic wolf, Cotter, who was in the castle calculating how to digest the celestial venerable's curtain in his hands, was instantly scared stiff. He immediately wanted to flee into the historical fog, feeling at that moment that his 8 arms were utterly insufficient, wishing he had 18 more legs. But it was all meaningless. The celestial venerable's curtain, Sha'ir was also very familiar with it, it even bore his spiritual imprint. The scorching sunlight transformed into a golden spear, and golden wings interwoven into sacred wings. Even hiding in the historical fog did not exempt him from this judgment of justice. What is mine, if taken without my permission, is a sin, unforgivable. Fleeing after committing a crime, the sin is compounded threefold. Gloom demonic wolf, Cotter was terrified out of his wits at this moment. He never imagined that the opponent's attack would be effective even when he hid in the historical fog. The opponent could even trace through the historical fog. He fled into the hidden history of the third epic, but it was useless. The secrets of the third epic were no secret to the opponent. He continued to flee, to the mysterious second epic, the Age of Dawn, useless, the Age of Serenity, useless, the Age of Twins, useless, the Age of the First Radiance of Fire, useless. Praise the fool. What kind of monster is this? Demonic wolf, Kotar had fled to the nascent second epic, a period so ancient that almost no one, except those who lived through it, could accurately trace him to the historical fragment where he hid. Yet, the spear of unshadowed dark behind him still hadn't been shaken off. He tried to make a wish, but the effect was poor. He attempted to transfer himself through a marionette, but his Beyander's spiritual intuition screamed warnings. Even if the marionette was hit, he might still perish from a single spear. Unwilling, he summoned a historical projection, pulling out the dangerous, terrifying, and uncontrollable Antigonus. Although the Antigonus he knew was only a sequence 2, as an angel, he was not entirely ignorant of the outside world. He also knew that Antigonus later grew to become a king of angels. With Antigonus's historical projection and the celestial venerable's curtain in hand, he still had a chance to counterattack. The celestial venerable's curtain was thrown out. Antigonus, whose eyes were dark and contained the vicissitudes of time, and whose cheeks had grown tufts of coarse, short black hair, used grafting to disrupt the spear of unshadowed dark's lock. Because of the Evernight goddess's hidden seal in the real world, even if Kotar pulled out the historical projection of the chopping block fish, he didn't have to worry about a backstab. The half-mad, chopping block fish, couldn't sense anything here at all. It was only after Kotar actually put it into practice that he could rest assured, discovering that he hadn't lost control over the historical projection. This meant that he now possessed combat power close to a king of angels, and the opponent's fake son simply couldn't kill him. However, his joy didn't last long. His arrogance was masked by the joy of reality, and ambition grew in his heart. The cautious demonic wolf felt confident, until a giant dragon covered in grayish-white scales opened its mouth and appeared before Kotar, who was frantically fleeing through the historical fragments of the second epic, at the transition between the nascent and twin epics, and bit down. The fragile body of a spectator pathway Beyander was like paper, if hit, it could be killed. Wishing demonic wolf, Kotar fell, consuming 1 resurrection count. In a hidden stronghold, Kotar, who had been resurrected at a pre-arranged location through a prepared contingency, had his pride shattered. He no longer dared to look directly at the sun in the sky and obediently found a place to hide. Meanwhile, in the historical fog, the massive grayish-white giant dragon slowly transformed into human form. Since the summoner was already dead, the summoned historical projection naturally ceased to exist. He directly grabbed the falling celestial venerable's curtain. The previous attack was, of course, a feint. How could he not understand the methods of the 3 tricky pathways? He had even hidden himself in the history of the second epic earlier than Kotar, lying in ambush. He had already imagined his form as a dragon of imagination. Achieving this was not difficult. he just needed to simulate Beander abilities, and he didn't lack the corresponding mystical knowledge. The curtain is back, but what's the use? Shah-Ir shook the curtain in his hand, which felt like it was woven from black velvet, and draped it over himself like a robe. Countless ways to use it appeared in his mind, the most impactful of which was, of course, "Unless you beg me, don't even think about it." His figure blurred, and through grafting, he directly returned to the sun, rising over the East Continent. And somewhere on the East Continent, Aemon, who was exploring the secrets of the first epic with Chernobog and others, looked at the sun in the sky, pinched his monocle, and revealed a slightly helpless smile. The East Continent, which was originally like a pure land, was no longer so safe. The one who felt all this most clearly was undoubtedly the true creator. This evil god, shrouded in madness and extreme negative emotions, had actually shown improvement in his state. As a former creator, it was not difficult to see Shah-Ir's current state. Even if it was just a virtual personality carrying a portion of the characteristics, the authority of a spectator was like this, not bound by external appearances. They could be as strong as they felt they could be. As long as their status, knowledge, and essence didn't hold them back, they could perform like a divine descent vessel. He was somewhat surprised that once Shah-Ir made up his mind, he directly illuminated the entire East Continent. Moreover, the other party might not really need the first blasphemy slate, just like in the fourth epic. Even after losing the first blasphemy slate, he still had the authority over the Chaos Sea. This was an authority entangled with fate. This weight would not be lost so easily. Returning to the sun, here. During the day, he transformed into the sun, purifying the curses and pollution of the East Continent. At night, he wore the curtain, repairing the broken spirit world of the East Continent and connecting the fragmented spirit world pieces. This actually had no substantial benefits. Without benefits, naturally, no one strongly wanted to stop it. Below Chernobog on the East Continent was the Chaos Sea. Above the barrier in the sky, above the spirit world, was the gray mist. Deep within the gray mist was Saphira Castle, like a giant light gate. He could feel a double tremor, and in his heart, he only thought of that classic line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Sometimes, too many choices, is also a kind of pain. City of Silver. Almost all the residents of the City of Silver participated in this meeting. The former chief, Havoc, a saint of the death pathway, felt no discomfort in the sunlight. His faith in Shah-Ir was incomparably devout. This faith brought fanaticism, as if he himself had become righteous and sacred. He officially announced that the City of Silver would convert to the full from now on. The sun in the sky, like a miracle, was the glory shared by the fool. Pray with me. The fool who does not belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the gray mist. You are the king of yellow and black who controls good fortune. Thank you for casting your gaze upon this cursed land, bringing us the light and hope of aspiration. Former Chief Havoc took the lead in praying to the fool. Beside him, the 6 elders of the City of Silver did the same. Even Loea, who believed in the true Creator, prayed devoutly. The hope promised by the true Creator was still in the future, but now light had already arrived, so let them sing praises for the compassion of the divine. Praise you, Mr. Fool. Although he didn't know when Mr. Fool did this great deed, and no news was revealed before he did it, this did not affect Little Son Derek's reverence for the patient. Little Son even felt a little self-reproach now. He had almost wavered in his faith in Mr. Fool for some reason before. This was truly inexcusable. Mr. Fool, I am truly grateful to you. Derek looked at the sun in the sky and muttered to himself. He had now awakened from his previous delusions. Mr. Fool indeed hadn't said beforehand that he was going to make an attempt, but a great existence like Mr. Fool had profound meaning in every action, and there was no need to tell them anything. Not to be repeated. The devout prayers and praises of thousands of people in the City of Silver miraculously appeared before Shah-Ir. Listening to these praises and gratitude for the fool, the masked fool deleted some of the exaggerated parts, then forwarded them to the gray mist, to the true fool. Meanwhile, On the North and South continent, Klein, with the help of the Punishers, had annihilated, Steele, McVitie, killed the cold-blooded Scourge, Bloody Thorns, Huntley, and a host of other pirates. He then happily cooperated with Alger, using the Storm Church to launder the bounty money from these pirates, receiving half of it, which amounted to at least £2,500. As for Danitz's share, I'll give you 5 seconds. £3,000 in cash, or the mystical item flying carpet. Choose one. If you exceed the time limit, it will be considered a forfeiture. Klein offered the choice, and before Danitz could react, he immediately started counting down. 3, 2, flying carpet, flying carpet, flying carpet. What is this? You just don't want me to get a reward. In his urgency, Danitz randomly chose something easy to say. Very good. Klein was satisfied. As long as he didn't choose money, he was very lenient. He directly threw the flying carpet in his hand to Danitz. This mystical item also had a good effect. Its function was just like its name. It could really fly, it was just a bit slow. What about the 5 seconds you promised? Danitz couldn't help but complain, holding the flying carpet. I counted it in my head. Klein's face was expressionless. For some reason, he felt a little nostalgic for the innocent justice from back then. If it were still at the first tarot club, something like this, which perfectly suited a young girl's tastes, might have been bought by justice for £5,000, perhaps even on installment. You, this person. Danitz nearly died of anger, but there was nothing he could do. Watching Gehrman, who ignored him and walked towards the bedroom, he complained softly, they both look like Lonis, how can their personalities be so different? Klein's hand imperceptibly trembled, and the top hat in his hand almost slipped from the coat rack. He really wanted to grab Danitz by the collar and roar, you actually think that guy, who took a house from you after meeting you once, is a good person? Can you grow a brain? You think he's good? Klein turned around in silence and asked. Of course. He saved my life, and I'll never forget it. Danitz replied without hesitation. This was a life-saving favor. Saving someone at the last minute has this kind of effect. Klein looked as if he had learned something. Before he could say more, a series of prayers rang in his ears like an alarm. What's going on? Why is the sound so chaotic this time? Did Mr. Hanged Man's and Angel's prayers get mixed together? Klein wondered, changing his steps towards the bedroom to the washroom. He closed the door, walked 4 steps backward, and arrived at the gray mist. What he saw was a large expanse of contracting and expanding crimson stars, which almost gave Klein trypophobia. What's happening? Klein vaguely clicked on a crimson stars, and heard various praises spoken in giant language. Thanks to Mr. Fool for bringing light and warmth. Thanks to Mr. Fool's favor for saving the city of Silver from suffering, and so on. He clicked on several more prayer images, and the content was all very similar, thanking the great Fool. The city of Silver has a son. I did that. Klein looked bewildered. Hadn't he just hunted a few pirates recently? Was there anything else? Someone is impersonating the Fool. Fool, Klein immediately thought of this. He clicked on Little Sun's crimson stars, but Little Sun also thought this matter was done by the Fool. All the prayer content was just praise and gratitude, without a specific description of the entire incident. At this moment, Klein noticed the crimson stars corresponding to Angel. This crimson stars was also flickering, and its size seemed a little larger. Recalling that Angel had been to the forsaken land of the gods once, Klein somewhat numbly clicked on Angel's crimson stars. Respected Mr. Fool, after entering the realm of demigod, I can finally use the 0-level sealed artifact, Painting of the Gods, borrowed from the Abraham family with relative safety. To test the ability of this sealed artifact, I used the power of the painting to return to the forsaken land of the gods and recreated the projection of the sun, illuminating the darkness of the East continent. This was originally an emergency measure in case of danger, but unexpectedly, the sun holds a sacred concept and unparalleled importance in the city of Silver. Facing those eyes full of gratitude and worship, I was almost unable to bear the excitement and fervor of thousands of people, struggling in darkness for thousands of years, finally seeing the dawn. I couldn't bear it, nor could I refuse. But fortunately, when they suggested building a statue for me, I thought of a truly great existence. Those demigod elders of the City of Silver had already regarded me as an envoy of a certain deity, and they voluntarily offered their faith. I couldn't refuse, and they also gave me a gift, a very good one-level sealed artifact. I offer it to you as compensation for my hurried failure to properly handle the issue of faith, and for needing Mr. Fool to help me stand. Demigods need faith, but I didn't expect that I almost couldn't withstand this fervent and pure faith. I overestimated my own sequence and ability. Fool, Klein fell silent after reading Angel's explanation. The reasoning seemed easy to understand. Angel explained it very clearly. Angel had advanced to demigod. Demigods need faith. It was difficult to acquire a large amount of faith on the North and South continent, so he set his sights on the forsaken land of the gods, which was isolated from the outside world. As a result, he accidentally overdid it and found it difficult to back down. After all, the City of Silver also had several demigods, and he couldn't quite control them, so he pulled out the Fool and gave himself the identity of a divine envoy. This guy did it on purpose, didn't he? Klein was somewhat unsure. After all, Shah-Ir had been traveling in Byam before this. Even if he had prepared in advance, it was too sudden, wasn't it? Was it intentional or truly unexpected? Whether it was intentional or accidental, who gave him permission to use the Fool's name outside? Mr. Fool's expression was not very good, but when the door of sacrifice opened and the staff full of vitality appeared, looking at the exquisite staff body and then thinking of the cheap staff he used in Backland, his anger lessened. A1 level sealed artifact. Mr. Angel, perhaps he really didn't do it on purpose, did he? After all this faith is directed at me. If a demigod needs faith, then I will also need it when I advance to demigod, right? Should I forgive him? A slight warning, then forgive him. Not to be repeated. Chapter 281, The Blessing of the Earth. Look for Chao Shunchang for Taiwanese novels. City of Silver. The circular spire where the six-member council met. Shah-Ir's figure emerged from the light, his golden hair brilliant and sacred. You can call me, Array, he said, looking at the elders of the City of Silver. Lord Array. After the former chief went back to playing dead, Chief Colin remained in charge of the City of Silver. This over a century-old, cunning leader was now truly convinced. The City of Silver could not refuse the sun, this was destined. Looking up at the sky, no thought of refusal could arise. Even a Sequence 4 demon hunter, a dignified demigod, actually lacked the ability to fly up and touch the sun. I want the Staff of Life, Shah-Ir said very directly. Please wait a moment. Although Chief Colin was surprised, he did not hesitate. He actually felt a bit regretful that the Divine Envoy did not ask for the 2-0 level sealed artifacts. Let's get them all, Shah-Ir said. I also want to see the City of Silver's 2-0 level sealed artifacts. It was enough to find a grade 1 sealed artifact for Mr. Fool to strengthen him, just using someone else's sealed artifact would do. But the 2-0 level sealed artifacts piqued his research interest, especially the Blessing of the Earth. Please follow me. Chief Colin nodded. He had nothing to fear. A superior who directly stated what he wanted was actually more reassuring. Based on his initial assessment, even if this person took the City of Silver's 2-0 level sealed artifacts, he would provide some compensation. The favor of an angel or even a god was far more important than 2-0 level sealed artifacts. This was the value of turning on the light. First, acting with kingly authority, everything would follow. Underground. In the City of Silver's secret chamber for storing sealed artifacts, Shah-Ir glanced at the Staff of Life in his hand. It had quite a few Beyander abilities. It could command extraordinary creatures of low intelligence, temporarily reduce madness, perform life alchemy to create puppets, even create long-lasting ordinary humans, heal injuries, accelerate loss of control, and imbue land with vitality. Mr. Fool holding it would be enough to impersonate a deity on the North and South continent. It was much more practical than a storm pathway sealed artifact, and he wouldn't be unable to save dying believers. He tossed it casually, and the staff disappeared directly. When the fool opened the sacrifice door, he would naturally receive it. Space ability. Chief Colin's heart rejoiced even more. He introduced other Grade 1 sealed artifacts to Shah-Ir, who merely glanced at them until he saw the 0-level sealed artifact, the Proof of Glory, at which point Shah-Ir became a little more serious. This was formed from a Sequence 2 Beyander characteristic of the Twilight Pathway. It was once a crown worn by Giant King Olmir. Its effects aside for now, its appearance was extremely magnificent, as if cast from pure gold, inlaid with pure gems, and surrounded by a mysterious halo, appearing very extravagant. This was once the crown of the Giant King, Chief Colin introduced. Shah-Ir nodded. He extended his spirituality, and pure, dense light emerged from the surrounding void. The City of Silver's underground dungeon seemed to turn into solidified amber, and translucent little worms with 12 circular segments were sifted out by the glorious and sacred light. If I'm not mistaken, we're even now. These little worms were difficult to move, but if one activated spiritual vision, one could vaguely see the phantom of the blasphemer Aemon, wearing a pointed soft hat, with black curly hair, a broad forehead, and always wearing a crystal monocle. If suicide didn't go against Amon's aesthetics, these Amons would have already done themselves in. Do you know, Shah-Ir said, revealing a thought that had always been hidden in his heart, if I want to compete with your father for the primordial God Almighty, bringing back the Lord of the Mysteries is what best serves my interests. It wasn't about supporting anyone to become a Lord of the Mysteries, not about helping Klein, Mr. Dorr, Aemon, or Banyu reach that step, but about truly reviving the Lord of the Mysteries, bringing back the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. The celestial worthy was untrustworthy, but still somewhat rational. If the celestial worthy returned first, then it would be difficult for God Almighty to return. Didn't you do that before? Each of these Amons showed extremely embarrassed expressions, and then one by one they disintegrated in the light of twilight, leaving only a valuable spiritual material, the Worm of Time. I released the celestial worthy. Is that true or false? At this moment, even Shah-Ir was stunned for a moment. However, Aemon liked to lie, and 9 truths mixed with 1 falsehood were not at all trustworthy. Listening to Aemon would only lead to self-inflicted internal strife. It was best to simply ignore him. Lord Array, what was that just now? Chief Colin, standing by, had not heard their previous conversation at all. A marauder's avatar, who prophesied a change related to the City of Silver and waited here early. There's no harm. Shah-Ir toyed with the few worms of time in his hand, wondering what price to sell them to Mr. Fool, or perhaps grind them up, mix them with water, and feed them to High Ruer. Prophesied a change. Prophesied the appearance of the sun. Colin's pupils contracted. He realized that this marauder was not simple, but since the divine envoy said there was no harm, he could only commit this matter to memory. The two then walked towards the last 0-level sealed artifact, the Blessing of the Earth. This time, Chief Colin didn't need to explain. Shah-Ir directly waved his hand to interrupt. He knew very well the origin of this sealed artifact. It was formed from the remains of Giant King Olmir's queen, Umibella, after her death. It did not contain Beyander characteristics, but it might contain a blessing. Shah-Ir actually really wanted to feed this sealed artifact, which looked a bit like a tree stump, to Lilith. But that fellow might not eat it, and the two might not be able to trust each other so much. Lilith, after all, had been betrayed once. The City of Silver's only food, black-faced grass, comes from the power of this sealed artifact, doesn't it? If one eats this food and dies within the sealed artifact's range of effect, and there's no execution by a close relative, then one will turn into an evil spirit. Shah-Ir looked at this 0-level sealed artifact. It could even transform the abyss into a pure land suitable for human life, yet such a divine artifact couldn't even purify the nearby land in the forsaken land of the gods. The World War truly favored Europe. Even after a whole epoch, it still had to smash this old European land to pieces. Yes, this is the City of Silver's greatest secret. The agonizing curse that plagues us comes from our most important food. Chief Colin closed his eyes, his mind flashing with images of his son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and granddaughter, whom he had personally executed. This resolute warrior suddenly felt a little tired at this moment. The bright sunshine outside was beautiful, but many people could no longer see it. The departed shall all rest in peace. This was no jest, he possessed this authority. Thank you. Chief Colin opened his eyes upon hearing this. Just as he was about to thank Shah-Ayar, he saw Shah-Ayar place his hand on the blessing of the earth. His words directly caught in his throat. One couldn't touch that directly, it would cause pregnancy. Chapter 282. I, omniscient, omnipotent. The blessing of the earth is a very dangerous sealed artifact. Without divinity, even just understanding its related information will cause one to become pregnant after a period of time, giving birth to something random and unknown. Even with divinity, there's still a chance of accidental pregnancy. The closer one's relationship is to the Giant King's family, the easier it is to get pregnant. Its status is similar to that of the Mother Pathway Sequence 2 Desolate Matriarch. It can grant the wielder all female characteristics, allowing for gender freedom, bringing them closer to the Great Mother, making it easier to conceive unknown things, and making it easier to undergo a sanity check after a moment of trance. Even if Shah-Ayar was an angel, rashly contacting this sealed artifact, while not life-threatening, could very likely cause him to suffer a minor loss due to a lack of information, making him somewhat disheveled. That's why Chief Colin was startled by Shah-Ayar's impulsive action. He simply didn't have the chance to finish introducing all the information about the sealed artifact. Don't be nervous. Everything in the world follows a principle. Shah-Ayar reassured Chief Colin. He hadn't become pregnant or turned into a woman. This was not only because he was an avatar separated from a virtual personality, but more importantly, he wasn't without experience in changing genders. Shah-Ayar had spent time with Cheek and knew how to deal with such an amusing passive effect. Feminine power influences the transformation, and targeting this point is sufficient. The audience pathway doesn't require such trouble. After ascending to an angel status, the outward appearance displayed is merely a matter of a single thought. Appearance is born from the heart, originating from one's mind. I'm taking this power. Shah-Ayar didn't take it without asking. Although he currently didn't have marauder characteristics and only possessed a Celestial Venerable's Curtain, wasn't that enough? The Celestial Venerable's Curtain contains a complete set of full pathway characteristics from Sequence 9 to Sequence 1. Shah-Ayar could, of course, use the Beander abilities of a Sequence 3 scholar of yore, borrowing power from his past self. With just a grasp of his hand, without wasting much time, the blessing, within the blessing of the earth, sealed artifact became Shah-Ayar's property. This is stealing, which the hermit would use. This was a blessing from Umibella, the Giant King's queen, perhaps given by the Mother Nest, who knows. In any case, since it is a blessing, it differs from a Beander characteristic. A separated identity carrying a blessing will not experience the terrible effects of consuming characteristics haphazardly. This is within the acceptable range and does not involve severe energy conflicts or fundamental logical errors. Chief Colin, although not understanding too much, as a demon hunter, could feel that with just a grab of Shah-Ayar's hand, the zero-level sealed artifact before him lost its previous terrifying danger. This made him even more awestruck, and he bowed slightly, signifying acceptance without any objection. It's getting dark. Close your eyes. Shah-Ayar looked up and said in a calm but undeniable tone. Upon hearing this, Chief Colin quickly closed his eyes. As a veteran demigod, he knew that some things shouldn't be looked at carelessly, or it would lead to death. The reason Shah-Ayar reclaimed this blessing was not for the authorities related to life and desolation. He only cared about one point, which also seemed to be a manifestation of the Mother Goddess of Depravity, this pillar of the real world, in terms of omniscience and omnipotence. The ability of the blessing of the earth can temporarily transform the wielder into a mythical creature, but it requires the wielder to withstand the mystical knowledge and insane thoughts brought by the corresponding mythical creature form. This naturally aligns with the hermit. The hermit, already in an information state, has too much experience. The door to omniscience and omnipotence once again opened to Shah-Ir, the outsider, in another form. Shah-Ir, relying solely on the power of the blessing, transformed into the mythical creature form of the door pathway, a door composed of layered light spheres. Each light sphere was made of star worms condensed from brilliant starlight. This light door flickered, and the remains of Umibella before him were directly teleported to the graveyard guarded by the giant king's spiritual imprint. Shah-Ir likewise vanished as a symbolic representation. If not for a few remaining shreds of reason, he would truly want to use the astral world to travel the cosmos. He very much wanted an astral world journey, but the outer gods outside Earth are truly troublesome, and the mother goddess of depravity might even be able to track this blessing. After the door disappeared, Chief Colin dared to open his eyes. At this moment, his arms showed illusory signs. Transparent small worms seemed to wriggle beneath his skin. Even without opening his eyes to directly gaze at the mythical creature form, simply standing nearby was immense pressure. This was also because he was a veteran demigod who could temporarily control parts of a mythical creature form through his own will. Without divinity, one death means a whole lot of deaths. Feeling the aura should be enough to die. In the North and South continent, even the most ordinary humans, tracing back, could not be considered normal, ordinary humans, at least they were the lucky ones. Ordinary people could not leave descendants and could not survive those chaotic and insane eras. Above the sky, the sun had disappeared, and a pair of gigantic bat wings obscured the firmament. Shah-Ir transformed into the mythical creature form of the moon pathway. As for the mystical knowledge of the moon pathway, he already understood it. Aulunia would not be stingy with mystical knowledge, he had observed it so much that he naturally understood it. At this moment, a silver moon hung in the sky, and its mercury-like moonlight shone upon the city of silver. The moonlight carried creation power. The land, purified by the sun during the day, began to gradually regain vitality under the nourishment of this creation power. Is this the moon? Sun? Derek hadn't expected Mr. Fool to be so powerful. The daytime sun was already surprising enough, but to actually see the moon, which was only recorded in textbooks, at night, and a silver-white moon at that. This joy of flourishing growth and new life was so sweet. Lovia, also awake, gazed at the bright moon in the sky, lost in thought. This scene occurred to many people. In fact, many people in the city of Silver didn't sleep at night because after the sun set and darkness returned, these people, returning to their familiar environment, couldn't help but feel a sense of anxiety, fearing that the miraculous salvation would ultimately vanish like a bubble. The problem of land and food has been solved. Chief Colin, feeling the power of creation in the moonlight, immediately went to the place where black-faced grass was planted. Under the nourishment of the moonlight, the curses on the black-faced grass were dispelled, and its growth became more pleasing. Even the variety showed beneficial evolution, and some other crops could vaguely be seen appearing. Is this an angel? Even though he had anticipated it, the old man's hands still trembled. The problem that had plagued the city of Silver for thousands of years was solved by this divine envoy simply taking that sealed artifact and utilizing Beyander abilities that the city of Silver had also researched. If the divine envoy is like this, how great must that fool be? Chapter 283, A Good Person. Woo, woo. On the east continent, forsaken land of the gods, the usually quiet night was uncharacteristically filled with wolf howls and the screeches of other dark creatures. This was impossible in the past, as the living environment on this land was extremely harsh. Even the monsters in the darkness were constantly vigilant, wary of the sudden switch between hunter and prey. But tonight was an exception. Some demonic wolves, not yet extinct, looked up at the moon in the sky with instinctive reverence. And those ugly, irrational, pus-oozing vampire-like monsters, bathed in the silver moonlight, seemed to regain some sanity. These wild vampires also looked up at the moon in the sky with worship, offering their faith instinctively in a somewhat barbaric way. This was almost a common choice for the dark creatures living on this land. Perhaps the sun's radiance was particularly scorching, but the gentle moonlight carried the power of creation, which benefited all intelligent beings, especially the dark creatures who particularly enjoyed such moonlight. Moon City. The three demigod high priests awakened all the members of Moon City. These people gathered together in the spacious square, bathing in the moonlight. If the sunlight during the day purified the accumulated pollution on them, bringing a burning sensation to those heavily polluted, then the moonlight at night allowed the residents of Moon City to feel tranquility and peace, as if their spirits were cleansed, pus oozing from their ferocious scars, and the pollution within their bodies slowly cleared. The High Priest of the Darkness Pathway, the Lightning Priest of the Red Priest Pathway, and the Night Priest of the Justiciar Pathway, the three demigods of Moon City exchanged glances. If the appearance of the sun might mean the return of the creator they once believed in, then the moon at night indicated that things might be even more complicated. Before believing in the ancient sun god, Moon City had once been a follower of Lilith. They knew very well what the moon symbolized. With such a miracle appearing, the changes on the East continent must be significant. If it was the work of a certain deity, then there must be some followers of that deity on the North continent. If the sun still rises as usual tomorrow, I'll lead a team to explore, said the Lightning Priest to the other two priests. He felt that, judging by his performance, he did not seem like an evil god. He did not demand anything from Moon City, yet he still shared his radiance with Moon City, located at the very edge of the East continent. The other two priests nodded. If the creator had returned, they would naturally continue to believe in the creator. If it was another, then Moon City should prepare early. Everything was for survival. These residents of Moon City were quite fortunate. Shah-Ir didn't always have the leisure to be a gentle moon. This time, he was just itching to familiarize himself with the power brought by this blessing, to understand this omniscience and omnipotence, and incidentally solve the City of Silver's problem, lest the City of Silver lose its black-faced grass and eventually starve to death, after the blessing of the earth was taken out. The true creator, also in the forsaken land of the gods, still did not interfere this time. For unknown reasons, the true creator did not protect these struggling believers on the East continent. So, when these believers were saved, he also did not act, even though in the true creator's traditional view, he could not accept his territory being invaded, even if it was partially abandoned. But the other party was Shah-Ir, an upper elf. Was it worth fighting Shah-Ir for the forsaken land of the gods, which had become a dead land, a ruin with only a few scattered city-states? Even if he won, what good would it do? If it weren't for needing to look after the fool to help him complete his advancement to angel ritual, Shah-Ir would have long since used the door pathway's ability to pack up the entire City of Silver and take it away. The biggest advantage of the forsaken land of the gods was that various Beyonder abilities could be experimented with here. No matter how big a commotion was made, the righteous gods and evil gods of the North and South continent could not intervene. Even the Lord of Storms, as arrogant as he was, would not be so deranged as to strike the seal of the forsaken land of the gods with lightning. January 15, Saturday. Blazing, Danitz's bounty had increased to 4,200 pounds. At this moment, he was treating Shah-Ir and Furs to a meal. As a seasoned sea adventurer, this guy was quite good at eating. The three of them ate and drank, and Danitz couldn't help but complain about Gehrman Sparrow's neuroses, his seemingly inverted way of acting compared to normal people. Although he dared not reveal information about the crazy adventurer, he dared to make normal complaints. Especially since this guy had even suggested meeting the captain before, which was truly strange. The Golden Dream was probably still near Sonia Island at this time, so the captain couldn't possibly come over. Besides, he didn't want such a dangerous guy to get close to the captain. Oh, the worry. Danitz drank in silence, while Shah-Ir and Furs clinked glasses in tacit understanding, clearly enjoying the gossip about Mr. World. And this pirate was a good person. Shah-Ir had borrowed his magic carpet earlier, wanting to take Furs sightseeing nearby and have hotpot. Danitz readily lent it, his only request being to go along. Shah-Ir, of course, welcomed an extra person to start a fire in the team, as it was much more useful than an alcohol lamp. Don't worry, Vice Admiral Iceberg is a Sequence 5 of the White Tower pathway. A Sequence 5 of the White Tower pathway will certainly have a solid foundation. She's been a pirate for so long and doesn't lack combat experience. Gehrman Sparrow might not be able to defeat your captain. You also don't have to worry about the other side. Normal women generally wouldn't like a man like Gehrman, Shah Iyer said, and Danitz nodded repeatedly in agreement, even picking up his wine glass to pour wine for Shah Iyer, seemingly wanting to hear more disparaging remarks. Although he looks quite handsome, strong, and rather masculine, and seems to be quite good in bed. Danitz's smile stiffened. But feelings take time to develop. A guy with ambition like him won't have time to pester your captain. Danitz breathed a sigh of relief. If he had time to pester your captain and not do other things, he would lose his charm, and your captain wouldn't be interested in him. Danitz first rejoiced, then reacted, his expression changing. Was he pestering the captain? No, right. Compared to those truly shameless guys, he was much more reserved, wasn't he? Furs looked at Danitz's constantly changing expression, barely able to hold back her laughter. She buried her head in Shah Iyer's arms, hiding the smile on her face. This 4200 was quite fun, he was a good person. Sigh. Danitz's expression changed several times. Thinking about having to continue serving Gehrman for the captain's sake, he sighed. They were all people, so why was interacting with Elia so pleasant? Look at him, not putting on any airs at all. What kind of person do you think our captain likes? Danitz felt that Elia must be very experienced, which could be seen from Sister Furs, who was sweetly nestled in his arms. Chapter 284, Look Down. What kind of person does your captain like? Vice Admiral Iceberg. Shah Iyer briefly recalled that he remembered Klein's speculation was that this lady liked men who could discuss and learn knowledge with her. But saying that would be a bit hurtful. After all, Danitz in front of him probably didn't even read novels much, at least he hadn't heard of Storm Manor, written by Furs. Your captain, I don't think her preferences are that singular. Didn't you say she's a very curious person? Then she must also be a mentally independent woman who can appreciate various strengths and criticize various weaknesses. Shah Iyer's words were very subtle, the underlying meaning being to be confident. Your captain also likes you, even if it's just a little, but isn't that a phased victory? Hee. Danitz took another swig of beer, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. He had been the sailor on the Golden Dream for so long, he must have feelings for the captain. She might prefer true adventurers, just like the motto of your Golden Dream. If there's a man who can share adventure stories with her, jointly appreciate collected artifacts and ancient documents, and is keen on exploring the unknown and adventuring everywhere, it should be easy for him to become her friend. So your chances aren't great. Find an ordinary girl who adores you and live your life. People like your captain are the most troublesome. She enjoys spiritual pursuits. Unless you are already in the same line of work, it's foolish to change your life's trajectory to suit her. Pursuing your captain is too costly, it doesn't fit Gehrman Sparrow's character and style. Shah Iyer gently stroked Furz's hair. He didn't think there was much compatibility between Edwina and Klein. Even if Klein now cast aside the weight on his destiny, combining the common strengths of Klein, Sherlock, Gehrman, and Dawn, it would still only stop at the friend stage. There are opportunities, but with that effort, wouldn't it be better to find an easier target? Danitz was stunned by the words. As a loyal fan who had secretly admired Edwina for so many years, this was the first time he had heard that pursuing the captain also required considering the cost. Night. Danitz obviously hadn't recovered from the daytime gathering, so much so that even in his dream, he recalled the scenes from the day, and occasionally even thought about how he almost died at sea this time, leaving only 4 colonial properties and the bad news of his death to his parents on the North Continent. Should he give up his unrealistic fantasies and try to develop a relationship? At least leave something for his parents to remember him by. But he was still in his prime, and settling down so early felt a bit unwilling. He could buy a few more houses if he worked harder for a few more years. It seems you've been through a lot recently. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Danitz instinctively looked up and saw a familiar figure. This was, of course, a beautiful lady, with an oval face, a high nose bridge, thin lips, and a pair of light blue eyes as pure and moving as clear spring water. Her brown long hair was parted in the middle and tied in a simple yet exquisite knot at the back of her head, then flowed smoothly downwards. She was wearing a beige coat with lace-woven petals at the collar, paired with a dark knee-length skirt, and brown leather boots on her feet. Captain. Danitz was very surprised, but with a little less of the usual joy. You seem to have met a very capable psychiatrist. Edwina noticed Danitz's change and could even see Shah-Ir, who had been sitting silently like an NPC, raise his head and gesture for her to sit down. Dreamwalker. Captain, let me introduce you, this is Alaya. Danitz made the introduction, then saw Furs, who was sitting next to Shah-Ir, fade and disappear. He almost instinctively widened his eyes, and for no reason, began to suspect Gehrman Sparrow, who was somewhat problematic in the head. Could it be because they spoke ill of him, and this guy wanted revenge? Calm down, this is in your dream. Edwina comforted Danitz. She glanced at Shah-Ir, then calmly sat down on one side of the magic carpet. In a dream. Nightmare's ability. Danitz understood. He said, he remembered the captain was near Sonia Island last week. Now it must be a simulated nightmare ability. To be precise, this is called Rosal's dream divination. Shah-Ir satisfied his curiosity and said casually. How would you know? Edwina was slightly surprised, this shouldn't have been read from his mind. I have some acquaintance with the Admiral of Stars. Shah-Ir hinted, after all, if he really wanted to pull strings, he would have to start with Rosal. Edwina nodded. Seeing that Shah-Ir had no intention of speaking, she then looked at Danitz and asked him what had happened. It all started in Port Demir. When Danitz saw the captain asking him, he didn't mind that the good old friend Shah-Ir, with whom he had drunk and had hotpot, was sitting aside. He poured out all his experiences of these days. Of course, his image was somewhat embellished in this account. He naturally couldn't be Gehrman's servant or slave, but an excellent assistant or collaborator who provided a lot of help to this newcomer who didn't understand the rules but was very reckless. Vice Admiral Iceberg. Edwina listened quietly, then finally nodded gently, evaluating Gehrman. He has no ill will. She said, turning to look at Shah-Ir, you're a little curious about me. But not much. Edwina didn't say these words. No, Captain, how are you so sure he has no ill will? Danitz was a little anxious. Gehrman Sparrow might not be a bad person, but couldn't he tell that he liked pirate bounties? He can't beat your captain. Shah-Ir said as Klein entered the chat group through the dream charm. As soon as Klein entered, he heard, Mr. Angel, badmouthing him, and what made him even more uncomfortable was that the woman sitting next to him actually nodded slightly, seemingly very confident. Speaking ill of others behind their backs is not what a gentleman does. Klein lowered his voice. He didn't think he couldn't really beat Vice Admiral Iceberg. After some adjustments, the souls herded in the wriggling hunger were now more suited to his combat system. At most, neither of them could do anything to the other. Why are you here too? Danitz was startled, turning to look at the entering Klein. What did he think his dream was? Debasing other men in front of a beautiful lady and praising that lady is what a gentleman does. Besides, aren't you going to look down? Shah-Ir pointed to the sea beneath Klein's feet. The three of them were on a magic carpet, so what about Klein, who had forcibly cut in using a charm? Chapter 285, Education and Aesthetics. Can you fly? Shah-Ir's words awakened him from his dream. The dream scene replicated the daytime when Shah-Ir, Danitz, and the fool were riding a magic carpet, sightseeing on the sea. The surrounding background was high in the sky. If he couldn't fly in reality, could he walk on air in a dream? Edwina anchored her dream to Danitz. Klein had directly cut in through the nightmare charm. So, did the charm's power include flying in dreams? Whoosh! When he hadn't realized it, it was like stepping on an invisible wall. Now that he suddenly became aware of the problem, Klein almost fell directly into the vast sea below. It was only because the alcohol lamp, unused on the magic carpet but lit to set the mood, was still burning that he could execute a flame jump, joining the other three as they sat around the round table. The scene was awkward for a moment. Klein held onto his hat, which had nearly flown off. Danitz covered his mouth, head bowed, seemingly in thought. Shah-Ir stirred the coffee in his hand. Edwina glanced at the three men, her light blue eyes blinking almost imperceptibly, seeming to hold a hint of a smile. This is Gehrman Sparrow, a powerful adventurer who recently debuted and can independently hunt the Blood Pirate General's first mate. This is Edwina Edwards, Vice Admiral Iceberg. Shah-Ir gave a simple introduction to both parties. Danitz, for some reason, became smug, as if he had only just realized that compared to his captain, Gehrman Sparrow indeed lacked some fame. "Good afternoon." Edwina greeted him. "Good afternoon, madam." Klein composed himself and responded politely, then waited for her to speak. And so, the scene fell silent again. Klein did not speak. Edwina also did not speak. Beyonders of the reader pathway like knowledge, I know that, and their knowledge base must be very broad. So, are you also very knowledgeable about things like fashion? Seeing the silence, Shah-Ir started chatting with Edwina. Mr. Elia, I am a woman first, and then a scholar. Although Edwina wasn't overly keen on dressing up, she felt she was very knowledgeable. No, extremely knowledgeable. She just wasn't ostentatious or seductive, she pursued refinement. Then how about trying a few different hairstyles? Shah-Ir snapped his fingers, and ripples spread through the dream. A mirror appeared before Edwina, and behind her, a servant, filled with lines and only a rough human outline, appeared, holding a pair of scissors and a comb in each hand, awaiting the next command. For him, there was no need to discuss any transactions, perhaps only playing dress-up was a bit interesting. This can be done. Danitz raised his head. He had only been half covering his mouth, but now he covered it even tighter. The captain's hairstyle had been the same for a long time. If he could see others. At this moment, Shah-Ir's status in Danitz's heart had risen to that of an adopted brother, a benefactor, a heaven-sent adoptive father. No. Klein looked at Mr. Angel, with somewhat unfocused eyes. You finished the introductions, but you should help guide the conversation and open up the situation. What are you doing now? He looked at Danitz again. And this guy, he had already hinted at what he wanted to ask Vice Admiral Iceberg, so why didn't he help him say it? You're not scared, are you? Shah-Ir looked at Vice Admiral Iceberg with a slight challenge. If she flipped the table, he would go offline and let Mr. Fool continue discussing cooperation. If she went offline, then they would discuss cooperation a few days later. However, these were all low-probability events. That's fine. Edwina spoke calmly. Her finger brushed the mirror, and her hairstyle in the mirror changed. The bun at the back of her head came undone, transforming into naturally flowing medium-length straight hair. The servant behind her also quickly tidied her hair, and her bangs fell across her forehead, giving her a quiet and refined demeanor. Of course, she wouldn't be easily intimidated or stumped. As long as it was normal and reasonable communication, she could face it calmly. Styling and such could certainly be discussed. It wasn't that she didn't understand, but she would decide what specific style to change to. It can be modified. Shah-Ir took back control of the servant, slightly curling Edwina's hair inward at the ends to better frame her oval-shaped face. However, what I really want to see are other styles, for example. He snapped his fingers, and Edwina in the mirror changed into pigtails, even her lips carrying a sweet smile, making her look somewhat like a girl next door who wanted to explode with gold coins. After all, if she didn't want to explode with gold coins, she usually wouldn't smile like that, it would be more reserved and demure. Edwina looked at her cute, almost sweet self in the mirror. Her calm expression faltered slightly, and she quickly flipped the mirror face down on the table, preventing Danitz, who had turned to peek, from seeing it. Taking a deep breath, she tried hard to forget the image in her mind. When Vice Admiral Iceberg's extremely oppressive gaze turned towards Shah-Ir, that spot was already empty. Even the vaguely outlined humanoid servant behind her had blurred and disappeared. He ran away. This made Edwina, who had already regained her composure, feel a surge of annoyance again. She could only temporarily suppress it and turn to Klein, who was maintaining his persona, and proactively said, "Danitz said you have some questions you want to ask me." "Captain, no." Danitz screamed in his heart. He desperately wanted to know what the captain had seen, but he had been too engrossed in admiring the captain's new hairstyle, causing him to be a beat too slow. Where was his good brother, his adoptive father? Share it. Danitz really wanted to leave the group and find Shah-Ir now, but he was the group leader. Without him, this dream would dissipate. Klein was also struggling to maintain his composure because he caught a glimpse of the angel returning. At this moment, he really didn't want to chime in and help the angel attract Vice Admiral Iceberg's attention, but he was here to discuss cooperation, not to be on tenterhooks or break character, so he could only respond. Klein answered, and out of politeness, even though Edwina also noticed Shah-Ir's return, she could only pretend not to see him and asked, according to her usual habit, "Mr. Sparrow, have you received an education? Is that question from the heart?" Klein's answer was equally insincere, "University graduate. You can even graduate from university." Danitz felt as if he had heard a Soviet joke. How did the school allow such a dangerous person to get in? He couldn't have graduated by threatening his professors, could he? Edwina glanced at Shah-Ir, noticing he was still stirring the coffee on the table. She continued to ask, "How many languages do you know?" "Dragon, Giant, Elvish, Ancient Hermes language, Hermes, Ancient Fusic, Runus." Klein frowned slightly, feeling something was amiss, but still answered. Edwina hummed, "Do you have any understanding of other fields of mysticism?" I wasn't the one who provoked you just now, was I?" Klein felt he was being put on the spot. He looked at the angel. That scoundrel was still stirring his damn coffee. Chapter 286, The Book of Natural Disasters. In a daze, past memories flashed like a revolving lantern, returning to a time when guardians were everywhere, and anyone could ask him questions. At school, teachers could ask questions at any time, and at home, parents could ask questions at any time. These were although mundane, they seemed to demand answers. Calm down, don't forget your identity. You are not even Klein Moretti right now, you are Gehrman Sparrow. This identity is fake, just an empty shell. You have no social connections, you don't have to accept any constraints, and you don't have to care about anyone's opinions. Proficient, Klein said expressionlessly. He swore that if there were any other questions, he might not continue to answer them. He was a mad adventurer, not a good student undergoing a teacher's inspection. I need to consider how to answer your questions based on your knowledge level, so that you can understand them more easily. Edwina's tone was unhurried, as if she was truly considering Klein's needs. You'd better be. Klein looked at Edwina. She showed no signs of guilt, as if she herself was a cold-faced but kind and patiently guiding teacher, as if she truly only wanted to better assess Klein's state. First question, the whereabouts of Beander creatures on the sea. Klein's words were cut short as Shah-Ir went offline again, as if he was very discreet about not listening to Klein's private matters. Why are you leaving? If you leave, how can I judge whether this female pirate is lying to me based on your reaction? He had just packaged his questions to deal with Angel and Vice Admiral Iceberg, but before he could even ask, Angel ran off. Klein could only dejectedly inquire about the information he wanted. Edwina, also a little dejected, answered the questions. Real world. After spending a week in Byam, Furs returned to Backland via a teleportation arranged by Shah-Ir. She had reported a week's time to Zio. Although she hadn't had enough fun, she had to end the trip to keep Zio from worrying about her. Not long after seeing Furs off, Shah-Ir heard a knock at the door. Danitz was the first to knock. It was clear that he really wanted to see what could make Vice Admiral Iceberg lose her composure, but it seemed he had been warned beforehand. Several times he tried to speak, he awkwardly held himself back. Klein, standing nearby, found it annoying. He took a step forward, bypassed Danitz, and closed the door, leaving the pirate outside. I think we need to talk. Klein was there to settle a score. He felt that Angel was truly a bane in his life. He had just caused him trouble in the forsaken land of the gods, and after shifting the blame to the fool, he could leisurely teleport back and continue to wander in front of him. He felt they needed to talk. They were both members of the Tarot Club, so what was with Angel constantly sabotaging him? How did you know I discovered an ancient elven ruin on Zimum Island? Shah-Iyer looked at Klein in confusion. No, I'm talking about. Klein choked. How did you know I found traces of elven activity? Shah-Iyer looked at the future soothsayer's next-door neighbor in surprise. Can't you show me some respect? Klein almost had the urge to slam the table in anger at this moment. Did you respect Danitz outside the door? You wouldn't have also investigated and found out that the sea god cult in Byam has some connection with the elves, would you? Shah-Iyer had a look that said, oh, you know too. Klein was slightly stunned, and the words on the tip of his tongue changed somehow. I also found some problems with the sea god cult. This sea god, I think he's at least a demigod, possibly cultivated by the elves to contain the storm church. As you know, the elves' inheritance is the storm pathway. Shah-Iyer analyzed for Klein, constantly saying, as you know. Klein maintained his calm persona, nodding, or expressing his views reservedly. When Shah-Iyer took out the Book of Natural Disasters, Klein's gaze towards Shah-Iyer changed. You cunning angel, I thought you were saying all this because you wanted to invite me to explore the ancient elven ruins together, and then the items inside the ruins would be distributed according to effort and contribution. But you've already explored it all. Or you just setting the stage to show off your spoils now? Klein had originally thought his life experience was rich enough, but it seemed he still underestimated the wickedness of human hearts. How could a person be so bad? The things recorded on it are written in Elvish. It's not difficult to understand, but it consumes a great deal of spirituality. Aside from the text, some of the illustrations are quite exquisite. Shah-Iyer handed the Book of Natural Disasters to Klein, and skillfully brewed black tea. He then walked to the door, opened it, and let Danitz, who had been standing outside, come in. Klein looked at the book in his hand, its cover adorned with ancient Elvish script. His fingers unconsciously rubbed the surface. He briefly struggled between continuing to reason with Angel and looking at the contents, then his brows relaxed, and he opened the book's cover. With just one glance, his previously relaxed brows furrowed again. It was indeed written in Elvish, and the calligraphy was very elegant, but the strange patterns, symbols, and markings, when combined, made one feel irritable just by looking at them. His fingers unconsciously tightened, but upon realizing that he couldn't even wrinkle the pages, he became even more agitated. Klein suppressed the anxiety and vexation in his heart, wanting to decipher something, and saw some ancient poems. These poems seemed to carry a certain magic. His brows furrowed tighter and tighter, and the air pressure grew lower and lower. This even affected the wriggling hunger, startling Danitz, who had just stepped into the living room. He had no idea what he had done wrong, but after a moment of hesitation, he still bid farewell to Shah-Iyer, very consciously closed the door, and left. These are some ancient poems, prophecies, fairy tales, and some hidden mystical knowledge that needs to be deciphered. However, reading them is quite strenuous, so I didn't trouble myself with it. Shah-Iyer briefly explained, and while speaking, added a lethal amount of sugar to Klein's teacup. So you're using this thing to bother me. Klein's emotions were affected. Even though he had consciously restrained himself, he couldn't help but say in a low voice. Have a cup of black tea to relax. Shah-Iyer gave Klein a mental pacification. The vexation in Klein's heart eased, and he subconsciously apologized to Shah-Iyer, then took a sip of black tea. The immense amount of sugar attacked his brain, and the accumulated irritability from earlier seemed to be drowned by the excessive sweetness. I already said, the words are difficult to decipher. Just look at the illustrations. Shah-Iyer didn't look at Klein, whose expression was twitching from the sweetness. He flipped the Book of Natural Disasters to its most valuable part, where the exquisite illustrations were lifelike, as if they could come alive at any moment. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.